Hello, Reanimated fans. This is Reanimated, podcast about all things zombie. I'm Stuart, West Coast host, East Coast host with the most. H.A. Conrad is with us too. Hello.
Hello.
We are here today to talk about #Alive, South Korean film from 2020. Production was in 2019, but it feels very 2020. And we also have a little tiny bit of news to talk about first.
Yep.
So that is what we're going to do. And H.A., why don't you head on in with, I don't know, how's COVID going for you?
Well, it's going. People tend to be pretty compliant with masks. The rates are still pretty low. The big controversy here in New York has been opening the schools. So they have now pushed back the date yet again. And it's very upsetting to a lot of people because basically parents have to make plans. And this is, I think, the third date that they have now gotten. And so instead of everybody going back at once, which was supposed to be this past week, I think, they basically have pushed this to staggered dates. I believe the K through maybe first or second grade are already back. And then they're going to bring in the rest of the elementary school kids, and then middle school and high schoolers are yet another date. So I think that the next round is September 29th, and then following that is like October or something. But in any case...
are private schools back open, or is all schools?
This is public schools only.
Yeah.
Which
so
is
do you happen to know what private schools are doing, just to set the stage for that sort of inequality?
They are all pretty much, from what it sounds like, doing distance or pod learning. I think there are a few that have sort of done the hybrid plan, at least as far as this is only anecdotal evidence that I know from friends who have children that are in said schools. So I think it really just depends on the school. It seems like several have opted for the hybrid plan, but that's voluntary. So if your child wanted to just be remote, you could do that. It seems like, especially amongst the more well-to-do parents, families, that they are doing pod learning, which means that they're basically hiring a separate teacher for a few families that are podding together. But the public schools, look, it's a huge issue because you have people that just don't have the means to have a parent stay home full time. And a lot of these are essential workers. This has been the issue in the tug of war from the get-go with this. So it's just a very stressful time for everybody. And then the other part of it is that the biggest issue is the number of teachers that you need in order to put this social distanced hybrid learning plan in place for the massive New York public school system. So basically the teachers union had been trying to communicate with the mayor and the school chancellor all along, and basically said, we don't have enough teachers that are going to be able to do this. We need at least 10,000 more that are available, because there's actually a lot of teachers that are immunocompromised or vulnerable.
Yeah.
And
you're never going to get all the staff back in schools anywhere. Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And I don't blame them either. And then there's also the issue that, there is just a huge discrepancy between one school to another school in terms of their ventilation systems and what is safe and how many kids can be there. So they really didn't do the best job of figuring this out ahead of time. They basically, were sort of rolling forward full steam without thinking about this. And so I get why the parents are mad. They found out I think the Thursday before that they were then pushing the date again. So
meaning that parents were left holding the bag with no instruction, or with just some remote instruction?
Just remote instruction, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't even know that has necessarily opened up for everybody either. So again, I think
pretty late in the school year already.
It's pretty late in the school year. So I think that this has just been a really, and adding on top of that the stress of everything else. So that's what's going on here. The other thing that's going on here.
Well, let me give you a California schools update really quickly, because we're looking at Sonoma County is on the mend. We were in the purple tier, which is, we went color coded in California. I'm not sure why, but purple was bad in terms of transmission rates and death rates and skilled nursing facility cases, et cetera, et cetera. There were 12 different criteria, and we were in like 7 of them in the bad column, so we were purple. We're looking at maybe getting in the red zone, which is somehow better. It's better than purple, I guess, which means that schools can start to file waivers with the state for on-campus learning. And so people are extremely eager for this to happen, and I get that. I 100% understand it, but I also am like, no way in hell. Remote learning is going pretty poorly in my household, I would say. It's okay, but like 6-year-olds and 3 hours of Zoom a day, don't go to, that's not a match made in heaven.
Yep.
So I can both understand why people want to go back to on-campus learning, and I also think, we just had a preschool outbreak, a series of preschool outbreaks in Sonoma County, like a dozen preschools. The one in my town had one child had COVID, and then that spread to 30 children and adults in one school. And going out to the families, and a lot of people are still trying to push this theory that children aren't carriers, or they are carriers,
well,
but they don't transmit the disease, or they can't give it to adults or each other. Well, BS, because it's literally happening. And so this is happening at the same time that there was a rally yesterday or 2 days ago. 100 people showed up in downtown Santa Rosa saying, "Open up our schools." And I'm just like, I don't know how we are supposed to, marry these two very, very opposed sort of things that are happening. Yes, it's a super crazy burden to try and do homeschooling while you have 2 working parents. And then also, do you want your children to get sick and then give that illness to other people?
Right. And then that's the other part of it. So I think what they're looking at here in New York, at least, and these are all the conversations that I'm having with like my friends and friends with kids or whatever. But, there's many different issues. Yes, the remote learning is very hard. It is beyond, I really do think that the parents have the hardest out of anybody with this thing just because of these issues. But the alternative is for everything to be shut down again if you have a surge. And I don't think we can afford to do that. And I don't think on any level we can afford to do that. And so while I think that this is all horrible, I think we just have to figure out ways, and I don't know what those ways might be, but I think we have to figure out ways to just, I don't want to say limp along, but kind of deal with this reality in that it's such that it is, and keep moving forward. I mean, look, as a person that was here in New York during the worst part of this, we do not want to see it go back to that. And I can't imagine, and I get it with the kids, I do, but like, I don't see how that doesn't spur another surge of this thing. And right now we are just at such a lower level. We managed to come back. People are doing what they need to be doing. And I feel like if you send the kids in, this is just going to start yet another wave, which I don't think anybody wants to see. And I agree with you.
Sending in the kids to school is not, to me, dissimilar from sending the canary into the coal mine.
Well, right, exactly. And I just don't, and I'm kind of, and I've had conversations, and I believe me, I think it is an extraordinarily hard issue to deal with. There's no question about it. It's one of the most difficult. But I mean, I wouldn't send my kid to school. I just wouldn't. I just too many risk factors, and it's just what the reality is. Like, as much as you might want it to be that the kids aren't spreading it. All right, let me put it this way. When have kids not spread something?
Right.
Really? So
usually by this time in the school year, I'm just getting my first cold of like the next 8 months of me having different varying like colds.
Right.
Because at this point, they've been in school for a couple weeks, and now I've got all kinds of new stuff in my bloodstream.
Yeah.
They're massive vectors, and that's fine. I recognize that, but we have to appreciate the situation we're in.
Yeah.
And in the words of Hunker, in the words of Fauci, we have to hunker down, like basically until spring.
Yeah.
I think a lot of educators around here are resigning themselves to the fact that we're going to be in remote learning until through the school year, and that's just something like, the sooner we come to that conclusion, the better, in a way, because all this back and forth and hand wringing about should we go back, should we not, is, distracting while we could be just perfecting or getting better at remote learning.
Right.
And one of the things that I wish I was seeing more from our local school districts was not only pivoting to, hey, yeah, we're just going to do all of our normal curriculum, but on Zoom, saying, how can we teach in a more innovative way for children whose attention spans do not support a multi-hour Zoom?
One of my thoughts is like, God, you have all these different arts organizations and museums and all these things that are also like dealing with different struggles and things like that. But why not bring some of that into the curriculum? Because, I mean, at least here in New York, a lot of those museums are kind of empty. You could partner with those museums and you could partner with those arts organizations and make this something, while not perfect, could be at least something innovative and special for the kids, right?
Yeah.
Like do tours of the Bronx Zoo, do tours of the museums, do like have you know, you could have a lot of different things. And again, I get it. I do. Because Zoom is terrible. And I mean, one of the struggles that we have definitely seen just firsthand is like our niece is disabled and she is visually disabled. So Zoom for her is really hard. You know, this is a kid that's got you know, different aides and different people with her at various points of the school day. So for her, she's really kind of lost not being able to have those visual cues even for Zoom. Like, and there are certain things that work out really well. Like she does have a one-on-one reading tutor and that works out. But there's a lot that doesn't, and they still haven't figured out that mess, you know? So
there is a movement for special ed to go back on campus, and I would absolutely support that because it would be a much more controlled cohort than just opening up the sluice gates for everybody.
Right. So anyway,
so one other COVID update, HA, just to move us along, and we could, I know that you and me, we can go back and forth on, not even back and forth. It's just we're echoing each other's sentiments. We could do it for an hour. But India is creeping up on the United States to be number one, which I don't wish for them, but they're almost up at 100,000 new cases a day, and they're only 1.3 million cases behind us for that leading position. India, pump the brakes. You don't want it. You don't want to be number one in this one. But we're having a bit of a resurge also in the U.S. in terms of
and Europe
cases.
is.
Yeah. Which Spain I saw was having a few more last week, but is it anywhere in particular?
Yeah, Spain, France, it's surging all over Europe, but Spain and France I think are the ones that are in the lead. Italy is going up again now too, and we remember what they just went through. So I hope that they managed to figure it out, but once again though, they actually have pretty much had all just kind of like, it just kind of had gone all back to normal. People were inside dining, which we know now is just this huge risk factor. I mean, I talked about the fact that they were going to probably bring some of that back in New York with a limited number of people. And then, you know, I'm kind of like, well, I won't be going. And, you know, my husband and I are trying to figure out ways, because we're already anticipating the upcoming winter to be a hard one, just from a mental health perspective, and so we're trying to figure out ways to stay healthier in that perspective. We have been doing, I know this is like so weird, but like most of, like in terms of things that are going on that we feel okay doing, most are at Greenwood Cemetery, who have like now a series of concerts and arts things going on.
Oh
there,
God, the cemetery is gonna emerge as some sort of like cultural center for the city.
And apparently they've been doing this stuff all along, but we just didn't know it because obviously we weren't hanging out in the cemetery all the time. But yesterday there was a string quartet that was playing outside, and you know they had everybody socially distanced, and you know in that moment we were like, oh okay, you know what, we're doing this is something a little different, and everything is gonna be okay. We just have to sort of shift our thinking a little bit, and you kind of go through those peaks and valleys, but like you know, had you asked me last year, would I be sitting in the middle of a cemetery watching a concert? Possibly, I guess, but not like...
It's you, after all.
I know. As my friend said, you're getting like low-key goth in your old age or something. But but it is one of the few places where, you know, even compared to the park, the number of people and the sort of way, I mean, it's just such a beautiful place that, you know, if they're doing these different things and we can go and attend them, that's cool. And, you know, but we're anticipating a long, dark winter, and I think we have to gear up for it and basically hunker down.
This is very disturbing to me. The France and Italy and Spain are all having such a big
Yep. Well, they went
surge.
back to normal. They went back, like, all of them were vacationing. They opened up all the restaurants. They opened up
Yeah.
all the beaches. Like, basically every single scenario that you should probably avoid, they did. So, of course, they're surging just like they are in Florida, which has a typical, I mean, all the bars are opening. And think about, I mean, look, think about European, just like the spacing issue, like at cafes and things like that. They're not doing any social distancing.
Yeah, I've seen
so-
a few Instagram, what do they call it, Insta stories from some friends of mine in Germany, and it does look like just some people I'm sure are being more careful. But this one guy I know who's in the bar scene who like works there, he's doing concerts. They're outside, but people are like crammed together.
Yep.
Nobody's wearing masks, and so I'm like, well, this
Yeah.
doesn't feel like
So
a
we'll
winning
see.
scenario.
We'll see. In other news, though, I did get my flu shot, and so that's good. And the nurse who gave me my flu shot basically said she had never seen so many people before do it. So that's probably a positive.
I'm
thing.
seeing some ads on social media already, like flu fighter band-aids getting put on people. I don't know. I'm hoping that we. I also though see on some of these public health forums that are going around in the county, people proudly proclaiming that they never get the flu shot, and
Oh, yeah, there's
they're not
always
gonna
those.
get they're not gonna get the vaccine for COVID when it comes out. I'm like, oh, all right, man.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, again, let's try to look at some of the brighter news. I think there's probably going to be less flu, and it already seems to be a little bit. The numbers are not what they normally see, and it's probably because people have been wearing masks and social distancing. So
Yeah.
it's not able to spread as it usually is, and plus with kids out of school, usually, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that tends to be the biggest vectors in terms of
It's a
getting
little early
it.
though in the season still.
But it starts hitting in different parts of the U.S. and they
Oh,
aren't
right. It hits
seeing-
the East Coast first, right?
yeah, and they're
It
not.
comes
And
here later.
I mean, they're not even. And also with people not flying as much, kind of going like across around the world and that kind of thing. So they're normally they're seeing just a much different level, and they're not quite seeing the numbers that they normally do. So hopefully that's positive news. So it won't be a double whammy for everybody. And
That's
maybe
the kind of thing we need, right? A light flu season so
Yeah.
we can continue to cope with COVID.
COVID. And that's and so that's the sort of gist of what's going on here.
Let's go then to some undead news because COVID, man, we've been talking about it since January. Since January 6th, I believe, was the first episode that we started talking about COVID, and so I'm not looking forward to that anniversary.
Nope.
Although maybe we'll have some good news by then. We'll see. So in undead news, there's very little out there. There were a couple of articles. One was a more of like a fan update that AMC is trying to direct some of its fans towards Twitch. And I think this is potentially good news because if they are trying to, it basically just means that AMC and the Walking Dead world, I think this is mostly for the Walking Dead World Unknown. Is that what it's called? I keep forgetting what that show is called. The New World? Something like that?
Yep.
The third spinoff. I think that it's an option or an opportunity. They're like seeking an opportunity to branch into new audiences, and it'll be something for like some of those webisodes they could air now on Twitch, which I already watched a fair amount of stuff on Twitch. Not so much entertainment media. I mean, that's using the air quotes. I watch video games on Twitch, and I watch talk shows for Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that on Twitch. I have not yet watched like highly produced content on Twitch, so it'll be kind of interesting to see what they decide to put out on that outlet.
Yeah, it's not I know a lot of people use it, and it's a very popular platform. I've never done it, so but I can see just looking at the different things that they're advertising here, how that could be kind of exciting. So we'll have to see, but I have a feeling it's going to be pretty popular. So
yeah, depending on how they use it, it's just we'll see. I'll keep an eye on it for sure.
Yeah, the next article was from Den of Geek, and it's kind of interesting. I'm like sort of like, well, why did this come out now? And I think they're just sort of grasping for certain pieces of content. But it's basically the question is why the military in the U.S. failed to stop the zombie apocalypse in the world of The Walking Dead. And it goes through a lot of different scenarios and the numbers, and basically stealing a lot from Max Brooks, World War Z, and that kind of thing, just the statistics and things like that, and what it would take to basically tamp down a zombie horde of the magnitude that they talk about in The Walking Dead. And part of why I threw this in there is just because we talk about this sometimes. But did you have any thoughts on this? I mean, it's kind of a pretty specific kind of topic, but not shocking.
Yeah, it's mostly, I think, where this article goes is that the supply chains would break down, something that you and I have spoken about before on this very podcast. And I don't disagree with them, but I also feel like this article is a little bit derivative and about 5 or 6 years too late to the conversation.
Well, one thing occurred to me though, because I think I don't know, like if you apply some of this logic to say COVID and what's happened with the supply chains, just from PPE and things like that, I guess you could draw some conclusions, but they don't even go there. They're just talking about The Walking Dead. So, and specifically artillery.
But point taken, supply chains have been something that people were very concerned about, and obviously the toilet paper supply chain hit some real snags back in March, April.
I mean, we never really had a toilet paper limitation here. We didn't, I mean, you wouldn't be able to get all the brands, but we never actually had them all sell out as far as I know.
Oh man, it was impossible for a good 5 weeks, I think, to get toilet paper here.
Wow. Luckily I'm crazy and I always have some on hand, so that's all good. So maybe we did run out and I didn't know.
I too buy the case and always have.
It's from being in a large family. It's one thing I won't ever. It is a nutty thing, and my husband makes fun of me. Bill makes fun of me all the time about it. Actually, he's like, "We're 2 people. We don't need this much," and I'm like, "Yes, we do." And see, this time we did. But anyway, recently what we've actually been noticing is that there's been a paper towel shortage. So that's the only thing that we've seen. And I was like, huh. And then I saw this whole article about it. And again, it's like they only make as much, and I guess people they don't like sort of stock up or have a huge.
You don't want it sitting on a shelf that you have to pay for, yeah.
Right. So I guess they just didn't anticipate the demand, and people are still hoarding it. And I have seen this, so we did. I mean, it's not like it was a big deal. We didn't really run out. We just found some and got it. But it's like it is a lot more. Like they have definitely jacked up the prices for it, which is sort of it's incredibly. The fact that you're paying like almost like $6 a roll or something like that's crazy. So anyway, so that's all that's going on here on that end of things.
All right, so that kind of wraps up, unfortunately, what we had for news.
Yep.
So that brings us to Alive, #Alive, our South Korean film. Like I said at the start of the show, it was produced and filmed in 2019, and then released. It was one of the first films to come back into theaters in Korea.
Yeah.
But it just came out, so June 24th, actually, in South Korea. It came back to theaters and was the top film in South Korea until it was bumped off by Peninsula, amusingly enough. So just, apparently, zombie movies are really the zeitgeist right now in South Korea. I get it.
But, and you may not think that this ties into our last discussion point about Max Brooks, but while I was watching this, and even when I saw the trailer for this, I kept thinking that this really sounded familiar. This whole storyline sounded very familiar to me, and it is. And there is this whole storyline in World War Z where there is this basically shut-in gamer guy, though in this case it's in Japan, and he basically has to figure a way, and I think he rappels down off of his balcony and everything like that, and but a very similar scenario, so much so that I was hoping that that's the turn that this film would take, and it doesn't, but okay.
Because in the book, that kid ends up like in some sort of weird Studio Ghibli connecting with a blind samurai in the woods in a very strange sort of very Japanese feel at the end of that, and that's not the way they go with this one.
But like even the stuff with like like the gamer is kind of lost because he doesn't really deal with the outside world that much. Everything's with his friends online, even down to the fact that I think he was out of food or hadn't gone shopping in a long time, only had like a few like meager supplies in his apartment. And they take that to a different level in this film, but it's the same premise. So I'm wondering if this is what I tried to find interviews, and I haven't yet been successful. I haven't been digging that deeply, but I wanted to know if this was possibly inspired by this, although I don't know if they would have said that. But it felt very much along the same lines in terms of that, and like just taking it a little bit further. And then this is also reminiscent of that French movie, the world, The Night Eats the World, where we saw our friend, and you know, the thing that you and I both liked about it was that you kind of saw the evolution of the lonely apartment guy, but in this case he actually does at his darkest moment realizes that there is another survivor that is not a figment of his imagination.
And here's a crazy tie-in now, HA. This film was directed by Cho Il-hyung, and screenplay was developed by Cho Il-hyung and a guy called Matt Naylor. And the film is based on Alone by Matt Naylor. Alone is the film that we are excited to see coming out in October, starring with Donald Sutherland playing a role. And so we have talked about this. We've already acknowledged that these kind of look similar. We've acknowledged that, they kind of look like Night Eats the World. And so there is a definite through line between at least Alone and this film, because there's actually a dude in common, and an acknowledgement that hashtag Alive is based on Alone. So we'll have to see when that film comes out how many other comparisons we can draw.
I wonder if one of them was like, hey, I'm doing this. Oh, I'm doing this too. Let's just team up so they're like semi-connected, or maybe one is the South Korean version of I don't know. But either way, we'll have to watch and sort of make some comparisons. But that's interesting. I didn't realize that they had that commonality.
I only just made that connection myself. But that's what happens a lot on Reanimated, is I have realizations that HA is usually way ahead of me on. In this case, however, our hero is Oh Jun-woo, or Oh Jun-woo. They spell it differently in the subtitles than they do in this Wikipedia page. So it's a little... And you know how we do with Korean names and pronunciations. Yes, so the default language was English dub for me on Netflix. Did you watch it the whole way through on English dub?
No.
You switched it up?
I switched it up, although I feel like mine didn't do the English dub. It was all just the...
How do they pick for us which one they think we need? It's very curious.
I don't know, but my only thought was maybe it had kept my settings from Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, but I was...
You did the same thing, huh?
I thought I did. Either way, I went back and forth a few times. It's easier to pay attention for me when it's an English dub sometimes.
Yeah.
And then... I did switch to Korean just because I wanted to hear. There's some stuff around the 2/3 mark of the movie where they're making out Morris 62, which is his pseudonym, his gamer tag. They're making out that he's like a complete moron who has no inner monologue or no filter, and I was like, what is he actually sounding like when he's saying these things in Korean? So I switched it back to that. But I watched a lot of it in English this time, for sure. That brings us, like I was trying to say, that brings us to our character, our hero, Morris 62, Jun-woo, or Oh Jun-woo. He is a shut-in. And I, for the longest time, I think throughout the entire film, basically thought that he lived in that apartment by himself because he was a successful streamer. But everything I'm reading, and there are a couple of clues in the film, suggest that that's his parents' apartment. And it is very clean and nicely decorated. It doesn't look like the kind of place where this dude would live by himself.
Yeah.
But you would never see his sister's bedroom or his parents' bedroom.
No, and also they never, I guess, is the sister supposed to be with the parents, I suppose?
Yeah.
But like... There's no other reference, like, and you just sort of see, I guess you see his bedroom at the beginning and he kind of like wanders in there a few times, but generally you just see the living space. You don't see any other, which is interesting because, you know, he's got a lot of time to kill. And I guess they were trying to make it seem more claustrophobic and things like that, but I thought that was kind of weird that we never saw that. It
certainly led to my thinking that he lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. And that he must have been just a really successful YouTuber or a semi-successful YouTuber who made enough to live in a nice-looking place. And it's, yeah, curious. I mean, when he goes into some of the other apartments in the building later, you do see more bedrooms.
Yeah.
So it's
But
a little
that's
surprising that they wouldn't have explored that,
right.
because they probably all have the same floor plan, or a lot of them do. The setting here is kind of some dense housing. I think it's 3 apartment buildings set in like a U shape.
Mm-hmm.
And this is worker housing. And I think it's kind of interesting to me. I was reading a lot into this with like this look at dense working class housing and its effect on transmission.
Yep.
So there's a lot of COVID parallels, obviously, here, and zombie, because that's why we talk about transmission on this show so much, is because they are related.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. What did you think of the setting?
Well, I mean, it definitely makes sense given what, and even what we've been seeing with COVID. I mean, especially here in the city, a lot of the more dense like apartment complexes and things like that, where people didn't have the means to leave the city, those tended to be higher transmission rates, not just because of the close proximity that people were living in, but also because of ventilation systems. And you're also talking about a lot of people who are essential workers who didn't have the luxury of sort of escaping the city or basically staying inside all the time. So I do think that makes sense just from a logistical level in terms of like what this would look like. And I also thought it was I did like the camera work, because especially even from the beginning, and they jump into this really quickly. Like the overhead shots just show the density and the sort of pans that they do of the apartment complex. You can get the sense of how closely people are living to each other and that they can't really avoid each other. And you couldn't avoid this probably. And it's unusual. I mean, the only reason why, our main character here, the first one that we learn about, why he is Juno is why he is okay is because he's basically slept through a lot of this, and he's been just locked in the apartment.
Yeah.
And I will say that there are parts, just even from the beginning, like when he starts to see what's happening, because it jumped, like it's pretty much like he's conscious, he gets online, and then
he wakes up, logs in, he's online for 30 seconds before somebody's like, what's going on outside?
Now, I will say this, and this was the part that I was like, oh, come on. And I know why they did it, and I get it according to the storyline and whatever, but the stuff he is witnessing outside, you are not going to leave that apartment. You are not going to open that door. No way. Like, you can hear people running around, like, and you're watching people like eat each other. And I mean, it's not like he missed that fact.
He's got some sort of denial going on to open his front door and let in his neighbor, which is one of the first major obstacles he has to deal with.
Right. And the neighbor like doesn't exactly like, it's not, he just like pushes his way in. And look, I think we've got to do this for a couple reasons. One, it gives him firsthand knowledge of what's happening, and us firsthand knowledge of what's happening. And while the guy in the news is talking about the symptoms, we can see this once the neighbor comes out of the bathroom again. And I will say the effect is pretty terrifying and good in terms of what this virus or whatever this thing is. And we have the information that the neighbor's brother was infected, and we see this play out later on in the film. But this is like really, and we also see sort of the progression of whatever this virus is, which is that people can seem very normal even seconds before this hits, and it hits really fast.
And the first time we see that, without needing to let or open the door,
yeah,
is the girl. There's a woman standing with a meat cleaver outside of the opposite building, the building where we eventually know that Yubin is inside.
Yep.
There's a woman standing on the stairs with a meat cleaver, and then a little girl, a teen girl maybe, walks up to her going, "Mom, Mom," and they hug, and then suddenly, there's I think a bit of a muscle spasm, and then some biting and chewing and eating. Within seconds before turning to a zombie, this little girl seemed completely normal. I couldn't even see any bites on her, and it led me to think, is this just like airborne?
Yep.
It turns out no, thank goodness, because otherwise that would have been even harder. However, it might as well be airborne, because this apartment complex seems to get taken over in seconds.
Yep. And so you see that the effects are good, the makeup effects are good, the sound effects, like the spine sound, like where the body's kind of like wrenching around with the virus, is pretty good.
Yeah, the title credits keep playing that up too, right?
Yep.
It was kind of an interesting title credits sequence with a lot of close-ups of some guy's back. And then they even went to the extent of putting some like gray mud on a guy and having him make the same contorted back movements. Like they found a back actor, an actor with extreme back muscle manipulation skills, and then just had pop your back a lot and
just contort a little bit. Just be like really weird and contorted, like amazing.
Here's some CG of a heart beating, and we'll call it there. I mean, it was. I'm not trying to poke too much fun at it, but it was a little bit like, all right. I mean, it was moody. It set the scene. It set like your expectation for where this film was going to go. But it did feel also a little bit out of place with the rest of the movie.
It did. But that's all right. I mean, you know, in any case, like his interaction with the neighbor, not just, and it is impressive. Like it's interesting because it's almost like the neighbor is about to leave and forgets he's about to leave. And so Juno is able to like push him out of the room. And he has that moment where he's almost going to get in. So I thought that was pretty well choreographed. But I just like the politeness where he's just like, I mean, he takes action pretty quickly. He gets a knife. He's like, okay, this guy's not right, and gets him out of his apartment, and good for him. But then the other guy who's newly turned gets taken out by this massive other zombie out in the hallway. And
dragged away like he's going to...
Yeah. Just
and
like
they've been talking on TV about how they were cannibals, and I'm like, but they're eating each other, which you don't see really again. Like when the policewoman gets eaten, she appears again very soon as a zombie. Yeah. She's not getting eaten somewhere by the rest of the zombies.
No. But I wonder if it's just like when they're supposed to first turn and all that kind of thing. But in any case, it sets a stage pretty neatly and very early. So I kind of liked that they did that. You know, it pretty quickly goes into, almost too quickly, I think, into his like level of sort of despair and whatever. I mean, he's got very limited supplies. He's really like, but it's sort of like, I feel like some of this wouldn't have hit him immediately, and it seems like he's getting this sort of emotional thing pretty early on. Though I would imagine, I mean, look, he like one of the things he's doing, he's like going through his father's scotch. So he's probably pretty drunk a lot of this.
That's by like day 2 or 3.
Yeah. But like, you know, he's
or is it even further along? Because the way that they turn things off on this is curious. Like, internet goes out on day 2. Power stays on until like day 15.
Yeah.
Or longer. Water is before power, as I recall, because he knocks over one of his last water bottles. And I mean, my inner monologue, of course, is going, all right, they're saying you need food and water for 60 days, fill your bathtub. Wouldn't you put
stuff around? Like, wouldn't you put stuff away? Like, so it's not like he didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
So that bothered me.
Pour out all the scotch and just fill all those bottles with water, for instance.
Yeah.
And I guess the scotch was also the only other clue that and the flashback he has, or the hallucination that his parents live here. Because he apologizes to his dad when he breaks into when he goes into the liquor cabinet.
Yeah.
But that does appear to be all he drinks for like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
almost.
Which, by the way, I just don't think, I mean, I think you would be so dehydrated.
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd be good to anybody, but anyway. So they've got that going on. And I mean, so compared to, say, The Night Eats the World, which I felt was a lot more realistic in terms of that progression.
Well, that was a zombie nerd's film.
Dream.
Right there.
I know. I just felt like it didn't totally hit with me. And it may also be like, you know, this was a little bit more dramatic and whatever. And
this kid's like a non-functional adult.
Yeah, no, and I know, and I think that's what they were trying to do with it. And clearly, he doesn't have the tools to cope with this and a lot of things, and they do show him evolve a bit during this. But they get him to this state of despair, so much so that he is going to off himself. And
because not just because he's like, oh, this is all overwhelming, but he actually hears his family. They leave him a voicemail as they're getting eaten, apparently.
Yeah, like
so
that's like
they're
rough.
very likely all dead, and that is what pushes him over the edge. And I get it.
And I get that too. So, but this is where enters our other main character, who Yubin, who is in the complex across the way and has been watching him, and she saves him, or helps him save himself, because then he realizes somebody else is there. And they do have funny exchanges, the one that you were talking about, like with the use of his drone, they manage to send supplies back and forth to each other.
Here's a problem with that, right? They do send this cooler. She slides it to him, and it appears that she must be on a floor above him because of how easily it slides down. And then he sends it back, and again, it's just like, we know that they're on the same floor. The rope would dip in the middle, and the cooler would stay right there in the middle of the...
Yes, it would.
So, not 100% on board with this
system.
But
yes,
I'm glad that they figured out a way to make it work with the magic of television.
But there's also like great, I mean, I liked how they mixed up these scenes, and they mixed up some of the drama. This could get pretty boring pretty quickly, but they also have one of the things that you glean from the news reports is that certain zombies sort of remember their vocations, which leads into this firefighter zombie being able to like scale a wall up to where she is. And the use of the table was really great. Like it knocks her out. And then you have basically she ultimately saves herself, but you definitely have Juno trying to save her with a drone, and so there's some good moments with that, which helps bond them together and gives them a level of trust with each other, which then makes sense as they move into the next thing. But he also has, I mean, look, he before this was definitely not going out and basically saying, I'm never going out. But in this case, he ultimately forages for supplies in the neighbor's place, who turns out to be this crazy survivalist. And personally, all I was thinking, I mean, I know he ran into issues in there, but man, all that stuff in there was so helpful. Like,
it was a treasure trove, man.
Like,
you know that there were axes and other pickaxes
like,
and good stuff in there, but he didn't.
He left everything behind other than the Nutella and the walkie-talkies.
And a jacket.
And a jacket that he seemed really jazzed about. But in any case, it does show that he has a higher, he's on board with surviving. He's getting a little bit more courageous and self-sufficient just in interacting with Yubin. And so, they ultimately have a plan, because she's noticed that the 8th floor is supposedly empty. And so they're going to get there. I think their plan is slightly flawed because there's just so many zombies, but she turns out to be this crazy
what is going on in that scene?
Where I'm like, what?
She is so his opposite that it's almost a little too much. Like, she is calm and collected while he is bumbling and kind of crazy and talking to himself, and she's just kind of camped for some unknown reason in her living room instead of in the bedroom.
Yep.
And has like booby trapped her front door and has a tiny axe that she seems pretty adept with. But once she hits the courtyard, which she does in one rappel move, she goes completely, I don't know what the word is. She's just like a commando. We don't know anything about her background, but it doesn't seem to be explained that she is an expert at martial arts or anything, but she just handles all these zombies. And suddenly it does seem like there's a million zombies down there as soon as they get down there, and there weren't any apparently before this.
Right.
But this is a good scene because it finally gets these two characters together, and he finally kind of his weapon of choice is a golf club, which I'm not a huge fan of, but he makes it work for him.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they, and they're a pretty good team together. He's impressed, like wildly impressed by her, as he should be. And they end up, I mean, it's interesting because they do end up on the 8th floor, which by comparison to, to his floor, where everything is sort of like blood strewn and destroyed, and there's like roving packs of zombies, the whole 8th floor looks pristine.
Totally.
It's kind of like they're in a totally different apartment complex, which makes you wonder why. But they find them out pretty quickly, and they end up into and this is the twist of the story where I'm like, but they end up in another survivor helps them out, and he lets them in, and I don't know, there's
some problems here. I mean, I get why he helps them because he wants to feed his zombie wife. Like, yeah, I get it. I get that. But how does he just happen to have whatever it is he drugs them with at hand
Right.
within seconds of finding out that they're like, has he just been waiting for
Well,
somebody else to show up so he could
and
drug
also,
them? And
did he put it into the sealed food, I guess? Because they unseal it right in front of you, and he drank the water. So I guess I was just kind of confused about how that happened.
yeah. I was also interested to hear that the word spam is also the word for spam in Korean.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. And also that's what
That's that's
Juno
what
would
Juno
request
is interested
out of
in.
everything.
I would like the spam. Yeah, very curious. So this guy, he's super stocked with food and water. He does say, "Oh, are you here for the rescue? You must have heard about the rescue." We kind of then put that down to him BSing them because he drugs them
Yeah.
and tries to feed them to his wife immediately afterwards.
Right.
But it turns out he wasn't necessarily lying, or it's a coincidence. But I feel like, well, first a couple things. Yubin should be dead. Yubin should have been eaten by the wife. She had her hands zip tied.
Yep.
She manages to keep the wife away, even though she's on this leash that gets released. Juno should have shot the man.
Yeah.
I mean, the gunshots are what draw every zombie in the entire area.
Yep.
So there's a few conflicting things here, but these zombies make a lot of noise just amongst themselves. So I'm not sure why some noises attract them, like when Juno closes the door to his apartment one time.
Yeah, I mean,
You
I
know.
think it depends on how close in proximity, maybe. And the gunshots make sense because they're kind of like a staccato sound.
But they're
and
gonna
echoes,
echo off of all the buildings.
So how would they? I guess they sort of said that they had better hearing or something weird like that. I don't know, but I agree with you. I think that they use this whenever they want to, but not exactly consistently. So
And there's also the odd scene before they've hooked up together when they're like, "Oh, it must be raining. Let's go put our pots and pans outside." And then they're like, "It's not raining," and all the zombies are just running for no reason.
Yeah, like I thought that was strange, and they never really explain it.
Yeah, I was curious.
So,
The third act scene of introducing, the bad survivor and his hungry zombie wife gets resolved, but then you don't really have time to enjoy the fact that he had an apartment full of food and water before they hear the helicopters and have to run again, which is, I don't know, this could have been a better second act thing, maybe.
Correct.
if they could have shoehorned it in there.
Yeah, I agree. But in any case, I mean, they show them and they do the dramatic thing where it's like they feel like they're done for, and then of course they hear the helicopters and they found them will to live, because before that she's like asking him to off her.
Oh, right.
But and they make their way up and they try to make it pretty dramatic in their dramatic rescue from the rooftop. I will say, like, in terms of like zombie choreography and makeup and how whoever this group of people is that they got to do it, and you do see you see the same people over and over again, even they're supposed to be different. But they're really incredible in terms of their movement, and I liked the choreography as they're spilling out onto the roof and how they do other things. They're terrifying. And
Between Kingdom and Train to Busan and this movie, and I'm sure there are others, South Korea just appears to have a bottomless pool of amazing zombie actors.
Zombie actors. They're here. I wonder if some of these they probably overlap. They were like, I've got this skill set where I can I can be this awesome, terrifying zombie.
I was in 10 episodes of Kingdom, guys.
I know.
You need me on this show.
But I was impressed with that. And then of course they get rescued, and that's all good. And they do sort of this weird fade away where it's that people, so this is the thing that does not make sense to me. So supposedly they're capturing and triangulating people who put on social media before everything went out that they were survivors. Well, first of all, how do you know they're still surviving? Would you take the risk to send anybody in to get them?
He took that picture on day 1 or 2.
Yeah,
right?
and also he took away all of his identifying information. He didn't say where he was. He deleted it all, or maybe I'm wrong, or maybe he entered it in. I don't know. But in any case,
it might have been on the cardboard.
Maybe. But in any case, I can't imagine that they would go in and risk everything to rescue one or two people. Sadly, I think that they probably would have just left them to die.
Especially when there was that Yeah, that was pretty close. And he's not even in the same building he was in when he took the picture and uploaded it. But maybe they were looking around and they didn't see, yeah, it's hard to say. But I do think it's a little bit absurd that they're like, oh yeah, use social media to get rescued when he hasn't been able to get a signal or Wi-Fi for a better part of a month at this point.
Yep. But anyway, that's how it ended. I did like a lot of things about this movie. I did like the interaction between him and Yuban. I thought that was like some good writing and some good acting between the two of them. I did like the choreography. I liked the setting, and I think that they utilized it pretty well. There were just a few mysteries to it for me that I was kind of like, huh. And who knows why they decided to do some of that. I think just, out of necessity maybe. But overall, it was fun, and I think that people would enjoy it. I'm not shocked. Well, I am a little shocked that given some of what's out there, but the fact that this was like in February and South Korea is really close to where the epicenter of the whole COVID thing was, it's sort of surprising to me that this took number one, but maybe that's part of why, and felt a little dangerous and whatever. And then you do have the theme that ultimately the government / military is going to save you, right? But then, to me watching this now, I mean, it's really hard not to draw some of the parallels to certain parts of our situation, which are relatively mild by comparison. But
yeah, and I think that's something that the filmmakers want you to draw those connections at this point. The being shut in your apartment, the fear of going outside, the seeing what happens when other people go outside.
Yeah. But anyway, I enjoyed it, and I'm glad that this is as successful as it is, and it seems like it's getting an awful lot of play on Netflix right now. So, and I have to say, I think I'm much more open to watching this right now than I may have been in February, or February or March. So I think that they did a pretty good job, and I'm curious to see this other film now, and to see if it's as similarly structured or if there are like different decisions that they made with it. So
it's coming. Well, it's scheduled to be released October 16th on video on demand. So I think we'll get a chance to see it.
October's going to be a pretty big month.
Yeah, we're going to have our hands full, man. I mean, Walking Dead just alone, between The World Beyond and Fear the Walking Dead. Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
But we'll make it work.
Anything else to add about this film? What were your sort of final thoughts?
Just that it was entertaining. It was fun. It's a small film in that it's not a huge story. It doesn't rise to the level of Night Eats the World as we've established, but it's still enjoyable. And I really enjoyed the guy who plays Junu. I think that he is, he's got a goofy charisma. The scene where he's eating the Spam and is like acknowledging how grateful he is to the stranger who's about to try and feed him to his wife. I think the guy just has these amazing facial expressions.
I know. Actually, one of my favorite scenes is like when he eats his final packet of noodles, or when him and Yuban are fighting over how to make noodles. That was pretty good. That
was funny too. Her character is a little more problematic because they don't develop it enough. I mean, she's a total badass. We get that, but it's not a developed character. It has very few soft edges.
It would be nice to get a little bit of background there, a little bit more than they give us, because they give us very, very narrow and broad, like narrow character sketches and just sort of like broad statements by her, but they never get into it that much. So you can see certain things about her, but we don't know as much as we know about Junu. Yeah. Which is probably deliberate, because I don't think they want you to think too hard about how she became a martial arts expert or whatever it was, because they just want to sort of build her into this kind of crazy superhero. I'll be honest with you, even while I was watching it, I was like, oh, maybe she is a figment of his imagination, because it was sort of it seemed like so out of the like nowhere that she suddenly was this action hero, that I was a little bit put off by it. But hey, it's fine, and I guess it makes it for a little bit more exciting in some ways. So but yeah, so that's all I will say about that.
Final piece of criticism is, in 20 something days, his hair did grow a little bit, but his blonde hair does not appear to be showing roots at any point.
I mean, Stuart, maybe he really just maintains that because that's important to him.
Without water? I don't know. Can you dye your hair without water?
I don't know. Probably if you just have peroxide, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
You might burn your head a little bit, though.
I'll leave that one alone then.
But agreed. I thought the same thing, and we all know how quickly hair grows, given our lack of haircut timing that we've had to go through, at least here. So, yeah. So that's all I will say about that. What do you want to talk about next time?
Next time we can go back to Lovecraft Country and do a couple episodes. I feel like that might be fun to get back into a little bit, but then we'll need to. We're gonna just kind of go back and forth a little bit for a while.
All right, perfect. So. Next up is the next episode of Lovecraft Country. If you have any thoughts of #alive, send us a message at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com or leave a note on our site, reanimatedpodcast.com, or you can tweet at us, reanimatedpcast. Thanks for listening, and ciao.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.